Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday Build. This is episode 1.45, and today we're going to be discussing the topic Undefended Openness to Learning, a Lifelong Pursuit, featuring The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I am a lawyer, a professional no-code, low-code developer, a legal tech educator, and the global ambassador to law schools for Gavel, formerly Documate. So as I mentioned, today's theme is going to be really around this idea of an undefended openness to learning throughout our lives. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is I have recently been listening to The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. This is going to be the second time I've been listening to this particular book, and I just love this phrasing of an undefended openness to learning. And in this particular book, he's using this phrase kind of in reference to Michael Dell, who's the founder of Dell Computer and one of the youngest self-made billionaires. And he talks about how he was kind of at this juncture in his life where he was operating in what Gay Hendricks calls his zone of excellence rather than his zone of genius, and that he had to be willing to kind of step out of what was really comfortable for him and what he knew in order to kind of go on and do something new. And so he loved that Michael had this kind of undefended openness to trying new things and to admit that maybe he doesn't know something, even though he knows a lot about a particular area, and taking that leap, that big leap, to kind of combat his what's called an upper limit problem in order to try something new and explore what could be possible in his zone of genius. So we can learn from this as well by approaching our lives and approaching our work and our personal relationships and so on with this kind of undefended openness to learning. And I think this phrasing around defended kind of speaks to this idea of self-protection. And this idea of self-protection kind of, for me, harkens back to The Fearless Organization by Professor Amy C. Edmondson of Harvard Business School, who wrote this great book about psychological safety. And she's specifically talking about in group settings and in the workplace and how we have this tendency to protect ourselves in the immediate, which is in the idea of in our immediate environment and within our colleagues and our kind of social groups, when there might actually be a long-term consequence of us not speaking up in that group. And there's this great quote from, I think, page 12, where it's talking about standing on giant shoulders, and this is particularly talking about how, there was some, research, in the 60s where she's kind of drawing a little bit from this particular research, but she adds that Shine, in that particular research in the 60s, noted that psychological safety was vital for helping people overcome the defensiveness and learning anxiety they face at work, especially when something doesn't go as they'd hoped or expected. Psychological safety, he argued, allows people to focus on achieving shared goals rather than on self-protection. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about how, we as people want to protect ourselves from immediate harm or danger. And there could be an immediate risk of harm or danger if we admit that we don't know something. And that can be, that we can get fired, or that, we can kind of have this kind of immediate consequence, even though if we just said, hey, I need help with this thing, or I don't know how to do this thing, can you help me, or whatever else, that makes it to where, you might have this long-term consequence of something actually going wrong. So this is a really interesting kind of parallel and, adjacent type of understanding of psychological safety, in that even though she generally talks about it in group settings, I think we can also consider it as protecting our ego, and that self-protection over our ego of I don't know something, and we have to drop that and let that go in order to be able to move forward and learn and grow as people. One of the other kind of parallel or adjacent kind of thoughts around this is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is this concept in psychology where it's a cognitive bias whereby people with limited knowledge or competence in a given intellectual or social domain greatly overestimate their own knowledge or competence in that domain relative to objective criteria or to the performance of their peers or people in general. And so this is kind of the idea that it's kind of like that idea that a little bit of knowledge is really dangerous, and that you think you know everything, but there's actually a lot that you don't know. So that's what I was kind of saying, is that I for myself, when I try to combat my own possible kind of overestimating my own abilities, is actually to incorporate learning as a habit, as an action that I do every week. So one of the ways that I do that is through my series, the Wednesday Build, which we're doing right now, and also through Code Word Hex. So I've put it on my calendar that every Tuesday I'm going to learn something new, and I'm also going to have to internalize it enough to be able to communicate a concept to someone else through a video. So that's how I kind of go about trying to incorporate learning as a lifelong habit, so that I'm always kind of trying to combat this Dunning-Kruger effect. But it takes my self-protection and my tendency towards protecting my ego and having to drop that with this kind of undefended openness to the idea that I can always be learning something. And I love that, especially in the tech space, it's really important to have this undefended openness to learning because things are constantly changing every single week. So, especially with all of the different tools that I like to use and that I think are really useful, they are constantly iterating as well. So there's always something new that we could be learning and thinking about how they interrelate with each other. And so that's something that we can all go away with from this particular conversation, is that we have to kind of look ourselves in the mirror and say, we are constantly going to be students our whole lives. And if we embrace that and have this undefended openness to that, this lifelong pursuit of learning can become enjoyable and not a burden, and nothing to do with our ego, and we can just drop that idea of needing to protect ourselves. So I will kind of give one example, which is around the idea of, even though I very much live in the no code kind of easy to use block style kind of creation and development, I also still want to learn how to actually code, because I think it's a magic trick to be able to put something together and just type a couple of things on your keyboard and voila, you can have anything that you want. So I actually started to take these workshops called She Codes. So I've already completed the basics and I'm working on Plus. And later, after I finish Plus, I can do responsive and then React, and essentially becoming a full stack developer in that sense. So even though I don't need to or have to do it, I think that I'm constantly trying to work my brain in lots of different ways. And it allowed me to make connections to things and understand kind of the underlying basis of how some of these different tech tools that I'm using that are no code, how they work and how they were built, so that I can understand how I can make them a little bit more pliable. So that's something that we can do, is constantly look adjacent to where we're kind of in our zone of genius, or, how we're working every day. So even though I'm in the no code space, I can still kind of peek my head over the fence and look around the space in the coding community, for example, and seeing how I can create these different tools. And then also maybe in the different industries that are adopting these tools and what can be made with them. And when we do that, then I'm able to see how the tools can be stretched to their max to be able to utilize them to their full capacity. So I think this is just something I wanted to share as far as some thoughts that were kind of bouncing around in my head after I heard this phrase of undefended openness to learning. And I hope that it's helpful just to see that we can all turn this into a habit of learning by forcing ourselves or putting it on the calendar once a week or twice a week to learn something new, maybe invest in some different courses and workshops that allow us to advance our knowledge and overcome the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we feel like we've known enough and we've learned enough and we're actually overestimating our ability in different areas. But it does take us kind of going through that process of not focusing so much on self-protection and defensiveness of our ego to be able to open ourselves up to the opportunity to learn. So that's just a quick Wednesday Build episode for today. I just wanted to share just these few thoughts with you. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I'm just going to leave you with a few announcements. So this has been an episode of the Wednesday Build, where we have new episodes live every Wednesday. The one that I'm doing right now is actually recorded a little bit later because I was traveling in Scotland, but generally I do them live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I also have Code Word Hex out every Tuesday. And that goes along with the Tuesday Forecast, which is a free weekly newsletter with different community events that are going on. I also have Gavel certification courses at chromiumacademy.com, as well as where you can find software and Airtable courses in Go Full Page, and so on. We also have a community called Chromium Global, and if you join Code Word Hacks or the Wednesday Build, you'll automatically be added to Chromium Global. And then we also have a very active Gavel community where we have a Slack group where people ask questions and get feedback and so on. So thank you so much for those of you that are watching. We're going to meet again next Wednesday, the 15th of November at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And we're going to talk about try before you buy, use a tool for a personal project before you migrate everything over. And I just kind of learned this through practice, which is that, you might get really excited about a particular tool and you just want to put everything over immediately. But I think it's helpful if you practice with it first before and kind of like understand the quirks and the differences between something maybe you already use in your current system before you put all of your work stuff into that tool, because it takes time to migrate everything over. So you want to do, I suggest that you do a little bit of something like a personal project or a smaller version of something before you migrate your entire let's say CRM, for example, over. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or via email at brittany@chromium.pro. And for any inquiries related to Gavel's law school program, you can email me at brittany@gavel.io. So thank you so much again, and I'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.